You have the ability, like I was saying, whether you're gardening or taking out the trash or in a shooting competition or writing a book, to be fully in the space, entirely in the space where there's nothing else matters.
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Cazazzo, the author of the upcoming memoir, Training with a SEAL. Today's guest is the same guest from last week because our conversation was so amazing and we went over the hour, and I try not to do that. We really needed him to come on back for round 2 because his story is amazing. So if you didn't listen to the first episode, I really encourage it because it's an amazing story of determination, perseverance, and it's definitely going to inspire you. As you know, he is a former Navy SEAL. He served for 15 years. He's served in 3 combat tours in Iraq and participated in 250 combat and advanced special operation missions. Today, he is the CEO of the Trident Approach. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited. Welcome back and speak to Diego Ugalde. Diego, thank you so much for being back on the show.
Man, you're so good at what you're doing. I have to expect like this whole audience to be like, what a crazy, awesome introduction. Thank you, Gina.
Thanks for being back on the podcast. I really love talking with you and your story. I've listened to it more than once. It doesn't get old and it motivates me to keep going after it. And what we talked about in the first episode a lot was we moved on to Buds Round 2. You came back for Buds Round 2. You finished Hell Week and you made it through. And I asked, my question then now where I want to pick up is, did you have any struggles along the way? Like, after Hell Week, it's kind of like, as they say, very few people then don't become a SEAL, right? So for you, was there any struggles or was it like smooth sailing? Like, I did it, I'm here.
There was struggle like every millisecond.
Okay.
And it was all of it was in my mind because I had trained my mind early on to understand that like everything could be taken away from me in a second. Like the first time when I was asked to leave Buds the first time, that was unexpected to me. I was so immature and so like cloudy space, like, oh, I'm just going to keep going, that they're like, hey, brother, we got standards here, man. You're not making it. And so you're not welcome here anymore. So I was like, I created like this defense mechanism in my mind to protect myself from ever being shocked or surprised like that again. And which is obviously just an illusion, but it was something, but I didn't know it at the time. So I really felt like you never know what's going to happen today. I made it all the way up to this point last time, but every day is a new day, something I haven't been able to whatever. And for example, like when we went into second phase, you still continue to do the timed runs and the timed swims and the timed courses and that kind of thing, but the times get harder to overcome. And so one day we were doing the obstacle course, but we were doing it backwards, the opposite way that it was designed to be run, which was just an interesting thing because our brains and our neuromuscular connection things have been so wired in to like, here's how I do this obstacle. Now they're like, we're breaking this down and we're doing this. It was like running the obstacle course in some ways. And I was doing so well, with everything. And I was running fast. I was performing well. I was a senior guy there because it had taken so long to come back. I was 29 years old. I was doing some leadership stuff. Well, one of the obstacles called the high wall. When you run it traditionally, there are these elevated stumps that you hop, and then you hop up to the high wall and then you vault yourself over. And then you do this kind of 10 or 12 foot fall down onto the sand and then you continue on to the next thing. Well, this one, we had to run up to the 12-foot wall and then scale it without hopping up on the logs to get to the top. It wasn't easy for me. I jumped up onto the wall. I almost grabbed onto the thing, but then I slipped and slid down the first side of the wall. and you're running in the soft sand, up to this thing. So it's not like you're on this bouncy track, just like, it. So it's, um, if I was to over dramatize, it'd be like in a dream where you can't run fast enough, you can't run hard enough or whatever. You're just like in this swamp, kind of thing. But anyway, again, over dramatizing it, but it kind of gives you an idea. So anyway, I did it again, went up, like I just missed the thing and I slid down the wall again. And then it was just like, boom, all attention was put on me. And it was just like, can you not get over this wall? And all of a sudden, like all my biggest fears, everything kind of came down on me. Shoot, this can be the end of my run. There's none of this is real, but it was like in my mind, is this the end of my run? And are they going to drop me from SEAL training? And because all the attention went on me, it was like, listen, if you don't get over the wall the next time, the entire class is going to go get wet. And I was like, oh, like this is the last thing you want to do in it. No SEAL I know like wants to be like wet and cold all the time. Like it's just like absolutely. And you do not want to be the reason why other people get wet. And so, maybe in first phase, it's like this really cool thing to struggle and fight and then triumph, but that's not cool anymore in second phase. You're here to be a SEAL. You got to kick ass at everything you do. Otherwise, what are you doing here kind of thing. And so the point is, none of this was welcome attention. This was not a good thing. So with the weight on my shoulders and fear and all this stuff and being excommunicated from the class from making people get wet and all this stuff, I ran and I made it. I got to the top. I got to the top of the wall. It was a big, long jump. And because I was kind of emotionally, kind of physically exhausted or whatever from, and by the way, I had run the obstacle course prior to this sort of thing. I did something that I had done for years, which is I used to take martial arts and I did these things like it's called a dive roll, where you land on the ground on your feet and instantly you roll to your shoulder, you roll diagonally across your back onto your hips, and then you roll out of it. It's like whatever. It's a way to receive the ground and energy and all this stuff without your knees or all that stuff just taking the brunt of the force. So I got to the top and then I just jumped off the wall and I did what I've done 1,000 times, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 times in my life. And as soon as my shoulder hit the ground, as it has done thousands of times in my life, it separated. I separated my shoulder. And it was a big pop and it was a big pain. And I rolled out of it. And they're like, all right, good job. Okay, now let's go for a run. And then we commenced to do this 4-mile soft sand conditioning run while my shoulder was hanging down. And it was the kind of pain. I see this happen where I used to watch football a lot and I see these injuries happen on the field. And when a player sustains an injury where they believe their season is over, there's just this thing. And that's what happened to me. All this to get to all this, and I separated my shoulder. I was going to get rolled back again. And who knows, so because I didn't have the ability to master my mind or anything like that. I was a herd animal in my mind. I was being controlled by my mind. And I was just like, this is it. I'm done. So I wasn't going to quit, but I just wasn't going to be able to function. I was no way I was going to do pull-ups or anything. So I went on the conditioning run and I was last, which was not unusual, but I was last keeping up with the group. This time I was last, not with the group. And they're like, dude, what's going on? You're not even running fast, but you're sweating. Like I was sweating like crazy. And I was like, I didn't know that I separated my shoulder. I was like, I think I broke my shoulder. And they're like, what? And so they took me to medical and they showed me what was going on anyway. It just so happens that the dive phase, the ultimate objective of dive phase is to complete all these dives. You have to pass timed runs. You got to pass timed swims. You got to do all this stuff. But there was no requirement to do pull-ups in second phase. Like no one ever failed second phase because they didn't do 20 pull-ups or whatever it was. So they said, hey, listen, we're going to try to keep you from getting rolled. You know, you've been doing really well and all this. You have to do all the dives. You have to do all the time runs and time swims and all that. But you just have to swim with one arm, all this stuff. So I did. And I made it through, and I rehabbed and all that kind of stuff. But every single day, you know, I wasn't running like, you know, I was running like I was hurt because I was hurt. You know, I couldn't move my left shoulder. And anyway, so no, this is a long way of answering your question. Was it like smooth sailing? Like absolutely not. I was not performing up to my best, which in the hardest military training in the country, that's like death sentence kind of thing. I was in the pool and we had to do all these races, and I was racing with one arm. And I just could not be last. And so sometimes I was winning these races somehow. I was just petrified that I was going to be the last, and even whatever. It just wasn't what it was. But at the end of the day, I continued to suffer because I didn't understand the mind. I didn't understand thinking. I didn't understand all these things. And I was losing in a lot of ways. I didn't lose because I continued on. But I was losing because I was kicking my own ass like every single second of every single day for all of this stuff. So yeah, that was like the rest of my experience in Buds. Yeah, it was pretty funny.
So let's transition out of that into because you said something really interesting, and I want to know like when in your life that's happened to you. When did you learn how to control your mind? Like when did you learn? You know, you talked about how you were beating yourself every single time. Like when did that mindset kick in?
About a year after I retired out of the SEAL teams.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, people are
Wow.
like, "Oh, you're a Navy SEAL? Like you're like mine." I'm like, "Hell no." I was able to sustain. I was able to receive the punishment. I was able to whatever, but I didn't, you know, I was not any kind of mind master whatsoever. Well, not any kind, because there were times, especially when I had to lose 70 pounds to get back to shape, to training, and there were some mind things going on. Like, yes, I don't want to do anything. Yes, I want to sit on the couch. Yes, I want to eat this food, but I'm not going to because this is more like there was some of that I had. There was some strength that I had in that space. I was just at the whim of my thinking because I thought I was my thoughts. I thought because I thought that comes from like my highest best self, so that must mean that it's the best. I didn't know any of that stuff. It wasn't until I was taken down to Mexico and given this psychedelic medicine called ibogaine that it showed me everything. I can't say everything. It spent 16 hours showing me things that I never knew to look for. It spent 16 hours showing me components within me that were steering my ship without my permission. It spent 16 hours of absolutely kicking my ass and showing me, brother, this is why you're suffering.
Mhm.
This is why these injuries don't go away. This is why, you know, there's self-sabotage here. This is why, and all of this stuff. And it was like me showing up as I am in the ring with Mike Tyson and just getting whap, 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 whap. You know, it was just like, I didn't have a chance. There was no fighting back. There was no, you know, if I had this addiction to control in my life, I had none. All the control that I ever thought or wanted or whatever, it was gone. I was just being pummeled by, you need to learn this lesson, homeboy. And by the way, here's your ego. And I was like, because I didn't think I had an ego. Like to me, my understanding of ego was so limited. Like I never walked into a room thinking I was better than anybody. Like that didn't. In fact, the opposite was true. I walked into the room thinking like, "Oh man, I don't deserve to be in this room," kind of thing, not knowing that that is a powerful manifestation of ego, just in a different way than I was ever used to understanding. And so when I found out and I saw and I experienced in no uncertain terms that there was this thing within me that was driving like a bat out of hell with, hair on fire and laughing and all this stuff, all the while I was suffering and breaking and injured and sick and all this kind of stuff. Oh man, that was a life changer. And there was this whole process that belonged to that. But it took me years from that moment of actually seeing these things that were actually running my life to getting to a place of sovereignty and actually in a healthy and loving way controlling my life or controlling the things that I can't control rather than controlling out of fear, controlling out of shame or anger or whatever, which were these toxic fuel mechanisms that I was living to fuel my life. It was insane. It was crazy. But it wasn't until that where I was like, I wasn't living life wrongly. It was as it was because that was just the process that I needed. But with Ibogaine and other psychedelics, I started to find that there was a better way to exist.
Today's podcast episode is brought to you by my absolute favorite company. If you know me or seen videos or photos of me, then you know I always have one on my wrist. I absolutely adore this company, DiscoverOmnia.com. DiscoverOmnia.com is the world's first smart crystal bracelet. Every single bracelet is handmade in the USA using real genuine crystals made on memory wire. Every bracelet is unisex and they're also aromatherapy. The cool part is the black onyx charm that is on the bracelet. It scans to your cell phone, connecting you to their Wellness Hub Elevate. You can also access their Wellness Hub Elevate on your computer or tablet. You just have to sign into your account. The bracelet gives you a 12-month membership. It has over 200 pieces of self-care content from motivational tips, meditations, breathing exercises around the theme of your bracelet, printable journals, and so much more. The content is ever growing. And that's not all. The bracelet also gives you lifetime access to their Elevate Together Club, which meets monthly via Zoom. Each month is themed to give you actionable takeaways to elevate your life. And with this podcast episode, you get 40% off your purchase order by using the code Mindset Podcast. Use that code Mindset Podcast for 40% off. Just go to DiscoverOmnia.com. DiscoverOmnia.com, code Mindset Podcast for 40% off. Get your bracelet today. That's really, really interesting. So what was it like then, like when you went through it, you finally became a Navy SEAL? Now in the first episode, Coach Max says, becoming a Navy SEAL is a single moment. It's just that photo, you become it, and then it's and that's it. And he goes, and then if that was your objective, there it is. But really it's so much more. The reason why I say this is because when he said it's that single photo, I remember when I couldn't do a pull-up, couldn't do it. And when I finally was able to do it, and everyone's seen me struggle for months and months and months, couldn't do a pull-up. And they would watch me bring special things after training to work on pull-ups and all this other stuff. So when the moment came for me to do the pull-up, I did it. Right. And my brothers actually were at training that day. And I jumped off, and they know me, so at that point they knew I was expecting a freaking parade behind me, and nobody cared, right? And they were laughing at me, and they were like, see, no one cares, that you can do something that you were supposed to do, X amount of months ago. But for you, is it when you had that moment, was there this celebration where you were I won't this parade and fireworks going off in your head, or was it just okay, I did it, now what's next?
One of my favorite movies is called Miracle. It's it's the true story of the 1980 hockey team where they beat the Russians. And the reason why it's one of my favorite movies is because there is a moment that is experienced there that it just it's one of the most beautiful things I think in Diego's cinematic history. I haven't seen all the movies or whatever, but this just moves me. And what it is Herb Brooks, the coach, years before he was a player on the hockey team and he got cut on the last cuts and they went on to win the gold. And so he missed the gold medal. And then he went on to become a coach. And then he was coaching, the United States hockey team, and they were going against this Goliath Russian team that was just literally unbeatable. It was just not going to happen, but he beat them. And it was this ultimate instant release of all this shame, all this shoulda, coulda, wouldas, all this doubt, all this everything. Like he did it, and it was done so perfectly in the movie. The stadium is going insane. They had just beaten the Russians. There was like 8,000 people, just like USA, like all this stuff. And he's looking at his wife in the stands, and she had gone through this journey with him and all this stuff. And he just takes a moment and he steps out from the box and he goes into the hallway, kind of where the players walk out to go onto the ice. And he's completely by himself. And the only thing that he can hear is just the rumbling of the thousands of people in the stadium through the concrete above him. And he just has this moment where he just breaks, and you can see it. You can just see this ultimate triumph. And I didn't have that. I was like, I wish I had that. But because I didn't understand the mind, because I didn't understand all these things, because there's so much that I didn't understand, I was so attached to ego and resistance and all this kind of stuff. When I got my trident, it was like, well, I got to go to medic school now, and then I got to kick ass there. It's one of the hardest schools in all the military. So and I suck at school anyway. So, and then after that, I got to go to a SEAL team. And then it's just like, it was, and by the way, there are many SEALs who don't have this experience, but it was my own experience. And so, even after I retired, after this 30-year saga of, it takes most people 6 months to make it through. It took me 10 years. And then I went on, retired as a senior chief. I was successful in combat. I'd saved lives. I'd done all this stuff. I stood at this mountaintop and I did it. I did everything. I did it all. And I just looked around, and it was like I just did my one pull-up in front of my family, and like nobody gives a shit. It's just like, but all the nobody was all here. It's like, we don't give a shit, Diego. And I was just like, how can this be? How can it be? Because I talked to people, all the way through that course, and I had so many conversations with people who were talking to me as though my life was the epitome of a life that needed to be experienced in order to fully experience what it is to be a human being. And I'm like, and I played along with it. Like, yeah, like I used to tell people that Herb Brooks moment was my moment, because I didn't know what else to tell. Like, I didn't have the capacity to tell them, like, oh, it doesn't mean anything. It's all, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I just couldn't believe that my life was the example, because I was miserable. I was happy. I was really one of the happiest people anybody knew. But at the same time, I was also all this unfulfilled. I was all this stuff. But it was very interesting. But what it took, all of that was a huge gift, because everything I had done up to that point in my life for any kind of happiness, satisfaction, focus, whatever, was all external.
Okay, so here's my question for you. With everything that you went through regarding emotions and mind and controlling you and all that stuff, and then the psychedelic, and what have you, like, it's gonna be a bit of a loaded question, like, in terms of like learn, because I'm wondering, like, with all the combat that you did and being a SEAL and, serving in those 250 missions and 3 combat tours and all that, like, what was your mind like at that point? And were you just kind of like going through the motions of training and every like of what training taught you to execute everything?
Yeah, 100%. That's why. So there would be years where I was going, when I was on the platoons, I would be gone 300 days for the year, just training of like diving, driving, jumping, shooting, small, unit tactics and all these things, just training all the time, all the time. And there was something that was huge. It was a huge concept in the SEAL teams called muscle memory. Like you do it so many times that you don't even have to think about it. You don't have to think about where your gun is pointing when you enter a room. You don't have to think about what your feet are doing as you're entering a room. You don't have to think about all of this stuff. And I could be wrong. And the reason why I could be wrong is because I didn't know any better. But my understanding was that was the height of, that was the objective. Get to a place where you've done it so many times where you can move through this thing kind of without thinking. And I took that literally, where if I was overthinking, I was messing up. And so I was overthinking about not overthinking and all this. But there were absolutely times where I would go through the house, flashbang would go off, and all of a sudden, a 30 or 40-minute run would be over, and I would just be like, oh, well, that just happened, kind of thing. And then we would go through the debrief, and sometimes they wouldn't have anything to say to me, which meant that I didn't do anything egregiously wrong, But that is not the optimal state of performance for humans. Flow state is. And flow state is a very, very, very different thing than muscle memory. I think the objective is to get to flow state. And sometimes people in the teams, whether wittingly or unwittingly or whatever, reach this place of flow state, but it's not by muscle memory. Flow state is when you're so focused, like you can feel your breathing as you are stepping into a room, as you're coming off safe on your weapon, as you're doing your sweeps, as you're making sure you're not pointing your guns at your buddies, as you're, clearing around barricades and things, and then going in, like everything is alive. Like you hear a lot of times about quarterbacks talk about how they show up in the NFL and their field of vision is like this, and over time it just widens up. It's like you're experiencing everything, and that is not muscle memory. Muscle memory is like this. It's like getting to work, and how did I get here? Like it's a 20-minute drive from my house to my work, and I have no idea how I ended up getting in the parking lot. That's muscle memory. It's not flow state. So there were times where I was achieving flow state, but thinking the objective was muscle memory. So I was never really, ever really, truly able to be in this state of flow because I was looking for the wrong things. Flow would come to me because of the design of the training, but I wasn't involved in any way. And there is a way to be involved so that you can create flow state for taking out the trash. There is a way to do these things. So, but I wasn't aware of all that. And so my whole life, the objective was muscle memory, which in other words was checking out. Do this so much that I just check out. And that I can tell you, Gina, is I was telling you before, one of the things that I do in addition to the Trident approach is I also coach veterans who are suffering significantly from post-traumatic stress and addiction and traumatic brain injury and all that kind of stuff. One of the two biggest reasons why they're there is because of this whole checkout mechanism that we've been trained to build, which is not helpful as a process of a growing and developed human. It's what they needed maybe at the time, but it doesn't, after a certain point, it doesn't serve anymore. It's like the enemy of transcendence.
Well, how does one get into that flow state?
Well, so Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, he's like the father of flow. He's the one who wrote all the books about it. He started writing books back in the 80s about it. There were some fundamental mechanisms that needed to be achieved in order for one to reach flow state. And I'll try my best to do some of them off memory. But one of the ways that I use to correlate it is one of the ways that we spontaneously develop flow state in the SEAL teams is our shooting competitions. We would go to these training blocks and we'd be gone away from the house for weeks at a time. And every day we would be shooting thousands of rounds. And at the culmination of these things, you're like, all right, who's the best shot in the platoon? And so it was a race. So competition is one, where you have to be like engaged in the outcome. And because when you lose in the SEAL teams, it's not a good thing. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want to be the last shot. You don't want to be known as the worst shot in the platoon. You don't, you know, everyone's watching the people that are doing this stuff. So you don't, if you have a weapons malfunction, you want to be the one who handles it properly, you know, all of these things. So there has to be a competition. And then a second element is it has to be in line with your skill development. Meaning, imagine I was the worst shot of anybody who's ever been in the military, and it was me against the best shot in the SEAL teams. I and he would be completely, well, not complete, but we would be disengaged because neither one of us would be tested to match our skill level. So that the matching of the skill level, so the challenge has to meet at the apex of your skill level. So if it's way too hard, you can't reach flow state, according to Csikszentmihalyi. If it's way too low, it's like playing pool with somebody. You're playing pool with somebody who's just like, they can't even whatever. It's just like you're disengaged. Or if you're playing with somebody who's just like knocking balls in every time, you're like, oh man. Anyway, so that has to happen. The other thing has to happen is you have to be left alone to focus on what you're focusing on. So, for example, if you're running a company and you have these spontaneous meetings like every 15 or 20 minutes, you're not allowing somebody to sit with their problem set and engross themselves in the process. Or if you're like, hey, you're just opening it, hey, did you see that email? It's like they don't. So if they're not alone to the process to focus on what's going on, can't reach flow state. The other thing is to be like an immediate indicator is cheating or not. So, for example, when we're shooting and we shoot still, we instantly think of there's instant feedback of, hey, this is working or this is not.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, for example, flow state and shooting your weapon, because there's certain we bang for your pistol and your pistol jam, you hit the magazine into the picture that it's seated properly. You pull the slide back to eject a round just in case the round is bad, and then you refocus and then you pull the trigger again, tap, rack, bang. What happens sometimes, not very long after you get into SEALs, what happens sometimes when people get jammed, they're like, oh, what's wrong with this thing? And they get all out of it. But it is still absolutely possible to remain in a flow state where you're plank, jam, tap, rack, bang, plank, because everything is responding as you're needing it to be. Now, if you had a jam and you're just like, it's not working, like the gun is the pistol's so jammed that you can't even slide the thing back, boom, you're out of flow state, because now there's like the time is tick, 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 ticking. The other person is like going on, progressing, and you're still fumbling around with this. How do I get this round out of there? You know, then you're out of the game, sort of thing. So those are some of there's like 8 conditions. I don't know how many I rattled off there, but those are the conditions that are necessary in order for some to reach this flow state. And what happens when all of those things come together, when all of those conditions are set, you have the ability, like I was saying, whether you're gardening or taking out the trash or in a shooting competition or writing a book, to be fully in the space, entirely in the space where nothing else matters. And it can be one of two things. One is time can slow down. You can imagine like surfing on a wave, and as the surfer is like riding down the side of it, like he's just noticing the little droplets of the wave that's kind of coming over. He's noticing each and every single muscle in his shins and calves and everything flexing and doing this to maintain balance or to shift the trajectory or the angle of the board and all this stuff. He's fully in it. And all of a sudden this ride, if you looked at it on a video, that might be 14 seconds long felt like 5 minutes to him or her. That's flow state.
I think that's really, really interesting on getting into that flow state to get out of your mind. For myself, like I'm such an overthinker, and I feel like a lot of people do. We overthink. To wrap it all up, like what do you have, especially because we're a mindset podcast, like what do you have to share with people, like to help them, like I feel like for you, like to get out of your head, like to stop overthinking and to just kind of live without, being in that flow state.
The mind is not capable of understanding these things.
Mm-hmm.
It does its best. It's doing its job by trying to connect, but it simply doesn't have the capacity to understand what it is. You can't think your way out of overthinking. It's the same. It's like Einstein said, you can't solve any problems using the same level of thinking that you used to create the problem in the first place. The only way to do this is to reach elevated states of consciousness where you come to a place where you're beyond the thinking mind and are able to become the observer of all that is. This is a big thing. So unless you are reaching elevated states of consciousness, it's just an illusion that your mind is solving the problem how to not think or how to not overthink. And it's just this endless thing that doesn't do anything. So it's like, for example, like our language is another problem. If I ask a 3-year-old what it is to be, they'll be like, or maybe somebody in third grade, hey, what is the paper on what it is to be? Or if I ask a college professor, what is it to be? But if they don't have an understanding or a connection to an elevated state of consciousness, and they don't know what it actually means when I'm saying, what is it to simply be? Or even the word stillness. What is stillness? A child will be like, I'm not supposed to move or whatever. And they'll fully believe and fully understand and be fully committed to this whole idea that they understand what that means. And there's nothing I can do to undo that for them. And there's nothing I would do to undo that for them. However, if they were able to reach these elevated states of consciousness, they would be like, that's not stillness. This is stillness. And so if you're genuinely on this pursuit, this track to stop overthinking, you have to bring yourself to a space beyond the thinking mind. And the way to do that is meditation is one of them. Psychedelics are another one. Sensory deprivation tanks over time are some. Vision quests. They have like sweat lodges. They're holotropic breathing is a huge one because you don't need psychedelics. You don't need drugs. You don't need anything. You just breathe a certain way for 40 minutes and you will get there.
Mm-hmm.
But this is out of the mind. So that's the difficult part because people are fully identified with their mind is the best they're bringing to the world. Knowledge is power, right? So that's like my value as a human being is how much I know, which is this huge illusion. But it's things that people connect to like it's no other. Like there's nothing more important than what I know. And we don't know anything. That's really hard. So anyway, the only way to get to where you're talking about truly, and I don't mean by being able to, but I mean really aligned and really integrated and have a visceral experience of what it is to not overthink, is to be beyond that space. And especially with our culture and what we teach, it's simply not possible, as far as I can tell, to come to an understanding of what those things are using what we're genuinely taught as Americans on how to improve your mindset, or like Nike says, hey, just do it. Yeah, thanks a lot for appreciate it. There's something in the way. What is that? Yeah.
That's what you do, right? With your company and stuff, you help get beyond the mind.
Yes, because that's the only thing that matters. Everything else, in my opinion, everything else is just like just low-hanging fruit or some happy shiny object that's not going to lead to anything. Yeah, you lose 20 pounds of weight, but are you doing it by just like shame, I suck, and just filling yourself with hate? Or are you doing it in full acceptance, full love for the self, and full non-resistance in the state of being a human being? You'll get to the same place. But what happens when people are using those really hateful and negative things is, yeah, I lost weight, but like now I'm onto womanizing now, or now I'm onto drinking, or now I'm onto whatever it is. It's like these other things because it hurts so bad to just exist as you are. And so another approach is to be in that pain of hurting so bad to exist as you are, to learn and grow and develop, and then you exist as you are in a place of strength. That's the transcendence, and that's really what is required to get to these levels that I'm talking about.
That's fascinating. For anyone that's listening, we're all mindset, and the way that you're speaking, it's just beyond the mind, which I think is absolutely fascinating, to really just check you out, because what you have to offer sounds absolutely incredible. So thanks for being here. Thanks for talking with me. I had a really great time. Your story is amazing. So I'm so grateful we connected. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Gina. I appreciate you all so much.
Of course. And everyone that's listening, thank you so much for listening. Go like, share, comment, subscribe now, be a Patreon member so you get full access to our bonus episodes and extra goodies that only our Patreons get. And tune in next week for a new episode. Thank you so much for listening.